Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Wow. 7 years ago, I found myself frustrated by editors at online publications who didn't want to share stories of real people, startups, entrepreneurs and businesses and how they were leveraging technology to solve real-world problems. And I think much of that, in their defence, was after many shady journalists were caught selling links and backlinks. And I found myself being told many times, you cannot link to any company in your article. But it was fine for them to charge businesses for the privilege, which always amused me. But I wanted to find a different way where I could share people's expertise, their insights, their human stories, their challenges, but also feature their voice and also allow me to connect with my readers and hear my voice rather than just read my words. So I convinced Inc. magazine back in 2015 to have a written article on my column and also feature an audio interview that would bring all of that to life. And yes, they did let me do that for a few times, but eventually they canned the idea. But it's quite amusing that all these years later, almost any site I go on, we see an article and also an option to listen to the article. And there's a great reason for that, because we all process information differently. Some people like to read, other people listen, and others watch videos. And I must admit that I struggle with even an instruction manual now, and I would much sooner just have a quick look at a YouTube walkthrough video any day of the week. Well, why am I telling you all this? Well, today we've reached 2,000 interviews, and we also have well over 2 million downloads, and the listeners and audience are growing every week. So I just wanted to take a little time out to thank each and every one of you and every single guest for supporting this show. As it has evolved over the years, it was Tech Blog Writer back in 2015. It's evolved into Tech Talks Daily. And you've helped the show find its way, so a big thank you. And if there's anything you want to hear more or less of, please let me know. I always genuinely cherish the time that the guest and the listener has spent with me each day for that 30 minutes or so. And I always make a promise to myself to try and stay in touch with everyone and meet listeners and guests on my travels when I take this show on the road. But I'm also guilty, as much as everyone is, of always being busy and having my head down just creating content. And I mention this because it's somehow 5 years since I spoke with today's guest. His name is Steve Hartert, and he's from a company called Jotform, and they make it easy for businesses to create powerful forms and also provide a suite of no-code tools that are flexible enough for small businesses, but equally robust enough for those larger enterprises. And essentially, they help organisations go from busy work to less work, all with forms. Forms that use conditional logic to accept payments, generate reports, automate workflows, and so much more. And make it easier for any team to streamline its processes. And I think since we last spoke, the options are now limitless with Jotform's 10,000 plus templates, hundreds of integrations, and almost 400 different widgets. But 5 years is a long time. In fact, the last time we spoke, the world was a very different place. So it's time for a bit of a catch-up. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to San Francisco, where Steve is waiting for a much-needed catch-up. So a massive welcome back to the podcast. We last spoke 5 years ago, which I struggled to comprehend, to be honest with you. But what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Really, it's been helping Jotform continue to grow, and I think this as on a personal level, helping my family survive the pandemic. But it's been a good 5 years for us, personally and professionally.
And that's so good to hear, because so many businesses have struggled over the last 5 years. And of course, when I was doing a bit of research on you, quickly learned that now Jotform is trusted by over 15 million users worldwide. But for people that are tuning in for the first time, and I suspect that many of them missed our first conversation over 5 years ago. So can you set the scene and just offer a bit of an overview and a reminder of the kind of problems that you solve for your customers with Jotform?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in a sense, what Jotform really is we help companies with the data collection, right? I mean, it boils down to we're an online digital form company. We help you develop whatever kind of form you want to have. We have a very user friendly interface. You can drag and drop fields and take payments. You can do surveys with it. You can do all sorts of different kinds of information gathering with customers, as well as just non-customers or even internally with your employees. And companies need data to function, and that's kind of what it boils down to. And so our role is to help make it as seamless as possible for those companies to collect that data and then to act on it. So we have integrations that make it work with your corporate workflow, whether it's something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet, or something as more sophisticated as HubSpot or Salesforce, and kind of everything in between. So no matter what your kind of business environment is, we probably have a solution for you.
And 5 years ago, when we last spoke, let's be honest, the world was a completely different place. Video conferencing, for the most part, people felt that it was awkward, or people just hated it and wanted to avoid it. And working from home was for the privileged few, and how things have changed in that time. So I'm curious, how have the problems that you solve for your customers, how have they evolved over the last few years?
Well, really, when COVID really broke out, companies kind of had to start scrambling for a solution. They were so used to kind of the old way of face-to-face meetings, face-to-face interactions with customers, going out and just maybe collecting data through, paper, clipboard and paper, that kind of thing. And when COVID hit, companies had to find a different way to collect that data. They no longer could go face-to-face, and they needed something that could be done remotely or in a safe way. And so what they did is they turned to us. They needed something that could still collect that data, still work in that work environment, work in that workflow, but it needed to be done in a remote online type of a way, whether it was through a computer, whether it was through a phone, a tablet, something like that. And really, companies suddenly they flocked to us and they said, help, we've got a problem here. Help us find a solution. And we've never looked back. COVID while it was absolutely horrible for the world, was a big turning point for us as a company, because we had a solution that a lot of people didn't know they had a problem, but we had the answer for them. So when that problem finally was put right underneath their noses, they turned to us to help solve that problem.
And one of the reasons I invited you back on the podcast today was, yes, to catch up, but also to find out a few more things about your insights and the things that you've experienced over the last few years. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was how no-code and low-code tech is actually democratizing access to software, and results that weren't possible for small and medium-sized businesses before are actually happening all the time now. But is that something you can expand on and share your experiences with?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, since basically, since the first softwares were developed back, way back when, they've been the domain of programmers, which required specialized knowledge, specialized education, specialized skill set. But with thanks to no code, you've been able to kind of use it as building blocks. Right? So then this is where something like our form builder comes into it. You can actually kind of just drag and drop the pieces that you want to have, much like, say, you're building something with Legos. You can actually kind of customize exactly what you want because all these features are already there. So if you want to build a web app, right, you want to build some forms, you want to build an e-commerce site or something like that, you can just drag and drop the pieces that you need and build a functional, professional looking, and very effective web interface to be able to actually collect data and sell product online. Likewise, you can also use that same type of no code to build a mobile app, whether it's for the iOS or for the Android environments. There's tools out there that help you build, good, solid apps that can help you, help your business grow, because now people obviously are on the go. So you don't need to be kind of beholden to those special talents and pay those exorbitant prices for programming knowledge, when you can do, pretty much what you need for your business right at your fingertips now.
And another question I've got to ask on behalf of business leaders listening to our conversation today is, how can this type of technology empower small business owners to embrace things like digital transformation, but ultimately take their business to the next level too?
Well, yeah, and really what it does is it kind of democratizes the technology, because it used to be, and again, I'm going to go back to when you actually had to hire a programmer to develop your app. Those could cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And if you're a small business, that's just a showstopper. You just don't have that kind of money to do it, or that kind of time to do it, because they can take months to build one of these things if depending on the complexity of what you want to have. And so for the small business, you're pretty much ruled out automatically at that point, because you can't afford $60,000, $70,000 to build an app for your business. But using something like a no-code or a low-code solution, again, it's a drag and drop environment, and then it may only cost you, a couple of $100s, if even that much, to build that app. And then you can get it, you can have that app, you can deploy that app, and now your customers have a way to interact with you when they're on the go. So they can pull up their phone, pull up their tablet, and they can fill out your forms. They can actually, buy product from you. They can communicate with you, or employees out in the field can be doing things. For example, we've got at Jotform, we have a maintenance company that deals with like trucks. And I'm not talking like a pickup truck. I'm talking like a delivery truck, the big, larger trucks or semi trucks. And their employees would be out in the field repairing tires, repairing, light maintenance, those kinds of things to trucks that are outside. Part of what those repair people had to do when they're out there is take a photo of it, record what had happened, track all that data, so then it would come back in, and somebody would then have to plug all that data into a database. Well, now having this available on a mobile application, those people can take the photo, they can put all the details of the repair right there into their phone. And now it's all put into the workflow, and all the systems now, up to date with everything. There's not this delay from the field back to the office and until it gets input. The data is put in there in real time, so they can actually see what's happening. So there's a full record now of that repair. And by virtue of it, everything's got a time and a date stamp, so you can see exactly when it happened, exactly where it happened, because there's a GPS log on it at the same time. So it actually kind of gives you this full, record of a repair with all sorts of additional information that you may not be able to capture. And now what that does is it makes that repair business, run much more efficiently, because they can kind of guesstimate, well, this is where we seem to be having more repairs, or up in this region, so maybe we should put more people up in that area on these days, because we know there's going to be a lot more traffic, and potentially there could be more repairs that are going to be needed at any given time. It also helps them control their inventory, because they can see in real time what kinds of parts and tools that they're going to be needing to have out there in the field. So this is where those smaller businesses can really shine with this, because it gives you this immense power of management control through data that just was never available to you before. It was just, cost prohibitive.
And before we started talking today, or before we started recording the podcast today, we were talking about how the world is opening back up now. And of course, for many businesses that have had a lot of hardship over the last 2 years, they're now concentrating on one thing and one thing only, and that is growth, and starting to make up for lost time and hit the ground running. So for those people, do you have any tips on how business owners can take advantage of no-code or low-code technology to help grow their business and indeed their customer base?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what's happened in the last 2.5 years is there's been this seismic shift in say consumer behavior of how they want to access information, how they want to communicate with companies. And so over these 2.5 years, now we've kind of got used to doing it remotely. So you've seen this massive shift in people doing things through mobile, through tablets and even through their computers. But there's this whole kind of a no-touch remote kind of an environment that has really come up, and people have just gotten used to doing it now. And so as a small business, you need to be able to respond to that, because people, again, are not going to be coming to your doorstep anymore to purchase from you or to work with you. And so it gives you the tools now to be able to develop those, websites, those applications, those communication tools you need to get back and forth between your customers and yourself. And again, these low code, no code tools allow you to kind of build those channels, those communication channels that you can actually kind of come now and work with your customers. The other benefit is it also opens up the world to your customers, because if somebody could be, I'm here in the US, you could be somebody on the East Coast of the US now communicating with a company on the West Coast, where they never would have been able to have that kind of access to those new types of customers. And that's the beauty of it, right? Once you go online, your marketplace is no longer wherever your salespeople can reach. It's global. And now by having those tools, now you've opened up your markets, incredibly large, and now your business can start to flourish. But again, you got to be able to have the right tools to be able to communicate in the proper way.
And before you came back on the podcast today, I was doing a little bit of research. I was looking at your social feeds and your blog posts and the website, etc. And one of the things that stood out for me is how little tweaks can make such a big difference. And one of them that I came across was how adding Apple Pay and Google Pay directly into your form. By doing that, customers can breeze through checkout much, much easier. Is that something you can expand on for anyone that's not seen that?
Yeah, I mean, you think about what's happened. Again, this comes back to COVID in the last couple of years. If you went up to go pay for, a product or a service, or let's say you're just in a retail store, you would put in your bank card, your credit card, or your ATM card, and you would have to physically tap that keypad with your PIN number or any other kind of information. Well, that was a vector for COVID. Yeah. So you needed something that was a no touch. So digital wallets, just took off because you could just tap your phone, tap your watch, however you wanted to work with it. And so there's been this, again, a seismic shift in how people adopted these tools. So things like using Apple Pay, for example. Personally, myself, I used Apple Pay before, but it was more sporadic. Now I won't shop at a place that doesn't have Apple Pay because it's just so convenient for me. So what we wanted to do is bring that same convenience level and same ease of use level down to that SMB marketplace, right? So I'm out here and I'm working. I built my website. I've got my app. I've got people out here that are, wanting to buy my product or my services, or make a payment for a registration for, say, a charitable foundation or a fund run or something like that. They're used to using those mobile wallets. We just brought that same technology to everybody else.
And I feel like we're almost only scratching the surface of some of the differences this technology can make. So just to bring to life everything that we've talked about today, are there any other examples you can share around the difference that this technology can make?
Well, I think it's just, speaking on the no code, it's really the difference is it's limited by your own imagination. Right. Yeah. You've got so many good tools that are at your fingertips now to be able to build those apps, to build better websites, to build better interfaces between yourself and your customer. Again, the more friction you can remove from those transactions and those processes, the happier your customers are going to be and the more customers you're going to have. And this is where these types of no code, low code, and using things like digital wallets and other types of technologies make it very simple and very convenient, because again, people are sitting on their couch, or at their desk, and they're not interfacing. So for them to actually, move to your competitors is a simple mouse click or a swipe. And you got to be able to make it very simple for those people to work with you and to just work with your company and work with those transactions. And this gives you the ability now to customize it exactly how you think your customers are going to want to work with and how it works into your individual workflow at your organization.
And we're not going to leave it 5 years until we talk again, but I've got to ask, what's next for Jotform? Is there anything you can share about what you're focusing on now and what the future holds for you guys?
Well, I think for us right now, one of the things that's really been a very popular product for us, and we introduced it really just before kind of COVID hit, but it's our enterprise product. We have two different flavors at Jotform. We have what we call Jotform, which is like our standard program, which is for single users. But then we also have Jotform Enterprise, which is for corporations that might have multiple people that are building forms internally or building these applications internally, because you might have somebody in the marketing department, or actually it's not even to somebody, but the whole marketing department may have their own types of forms The finance department might have their own types of forms. Operations may have their own types of forms. But now you've got kind of one person overseeing all of that. So all that data comes in. And now that data can actually then be pushed into your corporate workflow. So we've got companies, as large as, Apple and Disney and, major universities that are using us to help with their data collection processes, not only externally with customers, but internally with their own employees. And that's one of the things that has been growing, actually quite impressively over the last couple of years. And we see that actually continuing to growth, our projections go out at least 5 years, and we're seeing much more of that growth coming in that same 5 years. So that is something that has been very exciting for us to be a part of here, is seeing how companies, and again, COVID has kind of contributed to some of this, the COVID environment has contributed to this, is how companies look at data collection and how they can make it easier and really streamline the process, but still make it dovetail into their corporate workflows. And, so something like our enterprise product has been a real eye opener for these companies because they know that they had a problem. They had data coming in from all different angles, and they had nobody really kind of a central point of control over it all. And now they have that ability to do so.
Now, since we last spoke, the only change to the podcast really is I always ask my guests to leave everyone listening with a personal note of inspiration. So I'm going to ask you now, is there a book that has inspired you in your life that we can add to our Amazon wish list and maybe everyone listening around the world will be able to check out? Is there, all I ask is there a story behind your choice, and we'll get it added to our wish list. But what are you going to leave us with today?
Well, one of the books, and it's a slightly older book, but it's the Walter Isaacson bio of Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
If you read the bio, obviously you learn about his life story, but in those stories, there are some really good business lessons. You really understand how businesses operate, how the daily function. There's one thing to read about it when you're in school and you see it in kind of that clean environment, but to actually kind of see it from those front lines of a major corporation and of a CEO, you see how strategies were formulated, how strategies were and then executed, and how the results impacted a company. So there's so many great business lessons to be learned from that book. If you look at it from, not only just it's learning about his life, but you learn about how Apple was built. And how it, from a near-death experience to how it, to where it is today as the largest company in the world. Really some cool takeaways in there and some real eye-openers. And for me, on a personal level, there's one story in there that a friend of mine actually was part of the story. So that's probably one of the reasons it resonates. But when Jobs came back to Apple, they had a kind of a retreat. I want to say it was down just south of San Francisco in an area called Monterey. They had people talking about great ideas, and they started just writing down what they thought the company should be doing. And they literally had dozens, if not 100 different ideas written up on whiteboards. And at the end of the process, they said, okay, guys, pick 4. That's all we can do. And so what they do is and the whole point of that is it helps you focus. Because everybody can kind of scatter and everybody gets distracted and there's all these great ideas, but there's no focus point that everybody's chasing. And so what they started doing then is they started to get rid of, well, okay, that's a neat idea, but it's not very profitable. And so they streamlined, like say 100 down to 25. And now you've got focused, okay, now which of these 4 of these 25 are really going to make a difference for the company, that are really going to become revenue generators? And so not only does it help you focus on a product development, but it gets the team rallied of, now we know what we got to do. And so there's excitement builds up. And now from a management perspective, you've got people understanding what your goals are. And you've got people understanding what the impact that product's going to have on the company and what that product needs to do. And that's 90% of a battle sometimes for a company, is getting people focused and in supporting what you're trying to do. And that to me was one of the big takeaways from that. And again, hearing it from somebody who was there and then reading about it, it's one of these things that a company completely pivots and goes on to do fantastic things as a result of that. And that's a really big management lesson that I took away from it. And I think, other readers would be able to take away from it too.
Awesome. What a great choice. A great story. I need to check out that book now and find out what was on that list of 4 that was left over. But before I let you go, for anyone listening just wants to find out more information about Jotform or anything that we talked about today, what's the best starting point for everything?
Well, if they want to learn more about Jotform, just go to our website. It's jotform.com. If they want to communicate with me, they can find me on LinkedIn. I do a little bit of Twitter, but not a whole lot. But LinkedIn is the best place to find me. But beyond that, our website, you can learn about our single user plans. You can learn about our enterprise plans and see all the integrations that we have, payment options, everything, and how it will benefit your company. We've got some great case studies. So if you think that, maybe this doesn't work for me, you can read about how we've done some tremendous things for different kinds of organizations, from universities to smaller bakeries, mom and pop bakeries, and again, everything in between. You can even see things on our YouTube channel. We've got some incredible how-tos, again, video case studies there. So there's a whole lot of great information that's available for people that want to learn more.
Well, as I said a few moments ago, we've got to promise each other we won't leave it 5 years until we speak again. But I've absolutely loved chatting with you, having a good catch-up, talking about how the world has changed, how you've evolved, and the problems that you're solving with businesses using your technology. Incredible stuff. And also great to hear more about no-code and low-code technology and how it's democratizing access to software and delivering results that just weren't possible for small and medium-sized businesses a few years ago. But thank you so much for getting back in touch and coming back on the podcast. Appreciate it as always, Steve.
It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to chatting, and let's not make it 5 years this time.
I cannot thank Steve enough for coming on the podcast today. And as I said, one of the things that really stood out was the little tweaks that businesses can make, such as adding Apple Pay and Google Pay directly into a form. By doing that, customers can breeze through checkout so much quicker and easier. And it's really made me think differently about the power of a form. I think we maybe discount that and forget about the value that we can insert into those forms. So a big thank you to Steve for not only catching up with me, but for also providing his tips on how business owners can take advantage of no-code and low-code technology to not only grow their business, but also grow their customer base too. But over to you. We've covered a lot of ground today. Please share your insights, your experiences by simply emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. And today, I think we were able to deconstruct the world of forms on a website and maybe help you see the use of low-code and no-code technology and the use of forms on website and see them through somewhat of a different lens. But what are we going to talk about tomorrow? You guessed it. Time for me to spin the wheel of fortune. Where it stops, nobody knows, but where it will stop, that will be the topic of what we discuss tomorrow. But to find that out, I'm afraid you've got to join me again. So a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.